And Garrett, I know you were listening as well over the last 45 minutes. It was interesting to hear sort of the timeline. We've found out that President Trump ordered the strike roughly 3:30 Friday afternoon, and they proceeded to walk us through more of the timeline. What else struck you, Garrett, from what we just heard there from the Defense Secretary and the Chairman?
Yeah, that timeline notable, Craig, as the president was traveling on Friday to Texas and back. At the time, was sort of publicly ruminating on what his options were as related to Iran, well after he had made the decision, in fact, to strike. I thought both the chairman and the Secretary of Defense were much more clear on the military objectives than on sort of the political circumstances here. You heard Secretary Hegseth say that the goals of this operation are to eliminate Iran's missiles, their missile production capability, their navy, and anything that remains of their nuclear problem, to essentially prevent Iran from projecting strength or violence anywhere beyond its borders, and that those operations will take some time. You heard from General Caine about the various assets that are in place and the efforts that were taken to put them in place over the preceding weeks to make this operation as successful as they believe it has been so far. We also heard, again, from the purely kind of military perspective here, the cause of those now 4 U.S. casualties, those 4 U.S. service members killed thus far in this, were struck at a tactical operations center that was hit, they say, by Iranian missile. On the political ramifications of this, the points were far less clear. You heard Secretary Hegseth say this is not a war of regime change, but noting that the regime has in fact changed, is in the process of changing. He said at the outset that the U.S. didn't start this war. I think that's something that will be greeted with skepticism around the world, suggesting that the timeline here stretches back to the Iranian Revolution back in the 70s, and also sort of pre-butting the idea that this could become another endless war in the Middle East, suggesting that this generation, in his words, knows better. Craig, I think that's something that a lot of folks have questions about, and that we're just going to have to continue to see as this develops. Finally, I was struck by Secretary Hegseth's answer to the question about U.S. boots on the ground, telling the reporter who asked it, no, there are no boots on the ground now, but also going on to say, essentially, we wouldn't necessarily tell you if there are, that the Pentagon is not going to be giving every operational detail here. Again, I think these are all things that could potentially have a long tail if, as the president has said, this conflict goes 4 to 5 weeks or more. Craig?
It was also interesting, Garrett, to hear the Defense Secretary go out of his way twice to essentially call on the Iranian people to take to the streets. He said at one point, quote, "We hope the Iranian people take advantage of this opportunity. This is your moment."
Yeah, I think this is a sort of a key break here between the military objectives of whatever we are doing in Iran and the political objectives. Militarily, Hegseth and the president, in some of the various interviews he's given over the weekend, have said that this is not about regime change per se, but also militarily, the United States is clearly trying to create the circumstances that would be necessary for regime change to occur. I think this is part of the idea of not putting necessarily American boots on the ground, opening the door to the Iranian people that if they want to rise up, if they want to take control of their own government, the U.S. is saying we're trying to create the opportunity for that to happen for you, but we're not going to be the ones to do it. I think you're right to note that Hegseth was sort of more specific about that than we've heard from the president, but it's pretty clear the Trump administration doesn't want to be sort of saddled with the idea of regime change being a goal or the factor that's keeping us in this conflict. But if it happens, I think the administration is equally likely to try to or want to claim credit for it.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.